Hi, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Manny Palacios. I am your city councilman for District 8. What we're going to be doing today is having a very difficult conversation. I want to introduce you to my friend, Chloe Palacios. Chloe is with the San Antonio Children Bereavement Center, and they're an important partner of ours. And unfortunately, sometimes we have to call on them for incidents like what happened in Uvalde. And what we want to talk about today is Uvalde and how that's impacting us. So with that, Chloe, welcome. I'm glad that you joined us. What do you do at the Bereavement Center, and what is the Bereavement Center?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. I am the Marketing and Communications Manager, so I handle not only communications with stakeholders and donors, but also with clients and potential clients. So it's my job to get information about our services out to the community so that people are made aware of them, and also kind of that fundraising piece as well. But the Children's Bereavement Center provides free grief support services to children and their families after they experience the death of a loved one. And we really like to put an emphasis on the fact that these services are free. So we provide peer support groups where families can meet other families who have had similar types of losses. We provide individual counseling, and then we will also provide access to grief camps, which are basically camps where children can come together and spend time with peers who've had similar types of losses as well and do therapeutic activities together. And all of that is free. So we're really proud to be a resource in the community. We know that the situations that bring people to the center aren't often positive ones. And sometimes it's an unimaginable loss. Like it's something you'd never thought would happen, much like what we're facing right now, right? We never imagined that something like this would happen at an elementary school, but here we are. And so we're just grateful for the opportunity to serve the community, to put our experts, our licensed professional counselors at the forefront and provide as much service as we can when they need it.
Chloe, I'm angry and I'm heartbroken and I'm exhausted. And I keep coming across people who have expressed the same feelings. And so, and my kids and my friends' kids know that something's wrong, right? And we're having a difficult time talking about this with my kids in a way that is helpful. And because I think it's important that, that my kids know why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling, right? And I think it's also important for us to be able to talk about what they're talking about at school and to help put it into context. But I don't know how. I like to think I'm a good dad, but I'm not an expert in a conversation like this. And the reason I brought you on today, and the reason I'm leaning on the Child Bereavement Center, is help me through this. It's very personal for me, but help me through this. But also, I'm hoping that the folks who are watching this video can get something out of this conversation, because I have a feeling that they're going to be experiencing and are experiencing what the loss for words that I'm going through. And then I want to talk to you about grief also. So unpack that for me, please. Like, what do I tell my kids tonight?
Yeah, so I think the first thing for any parent is to always remember that you're doing the right thing for your family. It may not feel like the right thing. There's no perfect way to respond to things, but we can give you some kind of tips on how to handle it, how to start those conversations. But if you're a parent and you're wondering if you're doing the right thing, there's always kind of that feeling of, I'm not doing this right. But if you have that feeling, that means you're a good parent because you care. So I think just getting off to the right foot in that way. But the first step is to have the conversation. Your kids are going to find out about these things, whether it's from a friend, from someone at school. They pick up more than we like to think they do. They can hear conversations being had around them. So you should take control of that narrative and sit down with them and ask them what they know, because that's also a certain level of respect that I think will only strengthen that relationship between a parent and a child, is just asking them, what do you know about this incident that has happened? And then as you're listening to them, you can pick up on things that maybe aren't true. You can pick up on things that maybe they misunderstood or misinterpreted, and you can gently correct them in different ways. And that will also help to ease some of the anxiety that they're feeling as well. It's really important to have that conversation, because if not, typically what we see is that sort of bottles up inside of them, and it can be expressed as in generalized anxiety, separation anxiety. You may see that your kids don't want to go to school, that they don't want to leave your side. They're just really attached to you. They're giving you more hugs than usual.
Yeah.
So if you notice things like that, you can always ask them how they're feeling, what they're doing, depending on their age. It's also really important to talk to your children at a level that they'll understand. So something that's appropriate to their age. So, for a teenager, you can be more candid with them, and you can probably share more details with them if you'd like, if they have questions about that. For a little one, you don't have to go into a lot of detail, and they may even refer to someone as the bad guy, right? And you can take that language and help them understand that the bad guy is not coming after them, because they kind of have this fantasy language that they like to use when they're younger. And then as they get older, it becomes more solidified in, it's not a bad guy, it's a shooter. There's a school shooter. So I think having the conversation is really important, asking them what they know, correcting them if something maybe isn't right or isn't accurate, and then just reassuring them that they are safe with you, that as a parent, your job is to protect them, and that you're going to do that to the best of your ability, that there are people around them who work every day to protect them. And oftentimes like this, when there is just so much darkness and there's so much sadness in our community, there are little beacons of light, right? There are people who are doing things to support the families. There are people who drove straight to Uvalde with no questions asked and are there figuring out what they can do to help. And it's important to remind your kids of that too, that despite all of this darkness that we see, here is the goodness that we want to highlight. And that'll often kind of allow them to take a step back and remind them that with bad, there's oftentimes a lot of good. So those are just like some key takeaways, but in just talking to your kids, the conversation will naturally flow. I think a lot of times we underestimate children's ability to absorb information. And in situations like this, it's just important to figure out where their minds are at and how you as a parent can fill in those gaps. And then you'll see that their anxiety will likely decrease a little bit, but they may still have pockets of irritability. They may still feel scared every once in a while, and it's okay just to kind of address those situations as they come and just give them space and time to heal, much like the rest of us need to take too.
I also want to coach my kids, and I don't know what to tell them. I want to coach them on healthy ways for them to have this conversation with their friends, right? So what advice should I give my daughter and my son?
Yeah, I think for that, it's important for us to always check in on our friends, right? And we can say things like, how are you? But I think we get asked that so often that we get used to just saying, I'm fine, even when we're not, or I'm okay. But you can encourage them to ask specific questions like, hey, how are you feeling today? Or you can make it fun in some way, like if you were a color, what color would you be today? Or what color is your heart today? That's something we use with some of our littles. And they can say, my heart is orange because I'm excited to be here, or my heart is blue because I feel kind of sad. And that can start a different conversation, while also kind of doing that care and check-in piece that they need to do. So it's just asking the right questions to your friends, but maybe doing it in a different way. Okay. If they're older, it's harder, right? Because they may say, oh, that's lame, I don't want to ask my friends what color their heart is, but just encouraging them to check in maybe with a meme or like a funny GIF. I know there's like a whole debate on if it's GIF or GIF, but just encouraging them to still check in on their friends and say, hey, if you need something, I'm here. Hey, how can I support you today? That's a really great one for older kids, is how can I support you today? Is there anything I can do to help you? And again, just facilitating that healthy conversation, or even the unhealthy expression of feelings can also be physical. So maybe going on walks, going to ride a bike. Hey, do you want to play basketball later today? Things like that are good check-ins, and that are also going to kind of get rid of that excess energy that children might have when they're feeling anxious or overwhelmed too.
Chloe, I'm like I told you earlier, I'm angry, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I'm experiencing grief also. And but in children, and I know how it manifests itself in me, right? I mean, I've been crying and I've been just furious and just shaken, right? But in children, how does this grief manifest itself? Like what red flags should a mom and dad keep an eye out for?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know we talked a little bit about irritability, right, and anger. Those are some of the big ones. So if a child if they're younger and they're throwing tantrums, or if they're older and they're also throwing tantrums, right, because older children can still have those moments, that anger and irritability out of nowhere can often be a sign of that grief or anxiety kind of settling in. It is important to give them that space to kind of cool down before then saying, hey, talk to me about those feelings that you were having. Let's figure out what we can do to help you feel supported moving forward. Some of the other things are problems paying attention or concentrating, so it can affect them in school. I know we're close to the end of school, but as they move forward, if you see that, you're talking to them and they're like, hey, sorry, what did you say? And it's just a constant thing. You may just want to ask them, what's clouding your mind? Like, what's going on? What do you have on your mind today? How can I help you? And just always offering that support and that outlet for them is really important. And then of course, crying is normal and natural. And I think a lot of times when a child is crying, there's an immediate response to fix it so that they will stop. And sometimes you just have to let it happen. I think as adults, we're experiencing that, right? We're thinking about these families that have been affected. We're thinking about all of the life that was lost. And you can't help but cry and just kind of let that emotion out before you can move on to that next emotion of, okay, what are we going to do to fix this? Or what are we going to do to make it better? So those are some key things that we see a lot here, in just not being afraid to let children cry and express their emotions, and then finding healthy ways to do those things too. So if a child is experiencing a lot of anger, maybe, if you have a punching bag at home, offer them the opportunity to get all of that out on that punching bag. If you don't, use a pillow, tell them, punch your pillow, hit your pillow, like, let's hit it together, things like that. Those are really helpful. And just also learning lessons for them of, we can hit things like our pillow, right? But we can't hit our friends, and we can't hit mom, and we can't hit dad. So those are really great too, in helping to kind of set those expectations for healthy coping skills early on, so it doesn't turn into something more serious later on in life.
So I've got two more questions for you.
Yeah.
One, conversely, I mean, you've given us a lot of really great advice, but conversely, what are some common mistakes that parents make in situations like this? Because I just want to make sure that we're doing the right thing and avoiding the wrong things.
Yeah. I think the biggest mistake that and I kind of touched on this a little bit, is avoiding it.
Okay.
I think our natural reaction is to avoid difficult conversations, which makes sense, right? That's why they're difficult conversations. It's ones that we don't want to have. But when we don't have these conversations with children, we're doing them a disservice and not allowing them the opportunity to grow and not allowing them the opportunity to understand the world around them. And as much as we want to keep them protected and put them in this bubble that we hope we can carry around with us forever, that's not the reality that they're going to live in. So we want to give them the tools and the skills now, or as early as we can, so that they can become strong, well-rounded individuals in the future. So I think that's the biggest mistake, is just avoiding it. And as a parent, it's important to take the time that you need to prepare yourself for that conversation. So if you're not ready to have it, don't do it just to check the box and get it over with. Really take the time to sit with the feelings that you have and to take care of yourself before you go into a conversation like that with your child.
So let's talk about that. And this really is my last question. And
yeah,
why is this hurting me so much? Why am I so upset about this? I don't know anybody in Uvalde, and I'm really in pain. Like I'm very anxious. I'm very upset. And I don't really understand why it is I'm reacting this way. I didn't, and these feelings are catching me by surprise. And if I'm going to help my kids work through this, how do I check what's going on here before I take care of my kids? And I know it's healthy to feel all the feelings, but I need to be able to be a rock solid pillar for my kids. And I feel like right now there's nothing solid about me.
Yeah. Well, so I think the first part of that, anytime there's a loss of life that we don't understand and we can't really grasp onto, it's difficult for us to process it. And when we aren't able to process it, our emotions kind of go all over the place, right? I like to, Inside Out is such a great movie and a great example of that. Like all of your little emotions are trying to control your like big keyboard at the top in your head. And that's a lot of, I think, what is happening right now, is that there's been a traumatic event that has happened, and we're all trying to understand why it happened, why these families were affected in this way. And that's kind of what's throwing us off a little bit, I think. So it's important to just acknowledge it, to acknowledge the situation for what it is. And then as far as the managing the emotions that you have, it's a lot of the same things as children, finding a healthy outlet. So whether that's talking to someone or journaling or finding some outlet that makes sense for you to put your emotions out onto paper, onto the internet, onto somewhere, and kind of allowing yourself to break down what you're feeling is really important.
Chloe,
but then
I'm afraid of the internet right now. I mean, it's
yes,
so ugly when I go there today.
And that's exactly what I was going to say, is the next biggest thing is just take time to unplug. Sometimes too much information is almost information overload, and we can't process all of that. So I think and sometimes what I get from people is they'll say, well, it feels selfish for me.
It does a little.
To not take part in what's going on. And I think there has to be a balance in that. So it's not selfish to take time for yourself, because if you aren't 100%, then you can't give your all to the people around you. So it's really important to take care of yourself and to, put yourself first so that you can serve your family and then serve the community beyond that. Because I think too, if we want to make change and make it happen and figuring out what we need to do, you have to be 100%. You can't be 50 or 25%, because then you have very little to give as it is. So it's taking time to reset, to recharge, turning the phone off, turning the computer off. And I know that that's hard today. But even if it's just for an hour, watching a movie together as a family, going for a walk as a family, playing outside, you forget how good it is to play in the backyard until you're out there throwing, dog toys with your dog. And it's like, that was nice. We should do that more often. So I think it's just a lot of those things of taking care of yourself, being sure that you're okay and that you're situated and secure as a parent so that you can model that behavior for your children also, because your children are watching how you're reacting to this. And if you're emotional, I think that's okay because it gives them permission to be emotional. But if you're not dealing with it in a healthy way, they're going to pick up on it and they're going to wonder if it's something that they're doing wrong. And children internalize a lot of that too.
So Chloe, earlier in the conversation, you'd mentioned there being an abundance of darkness, and that we have to look for the beacons of light and really anchor onto those. Today, you've been my beacon of light, and I'm hoping that a lot of people get some benefit out of the conversation you and I have. I have a feeling that a lot of people are going through,
Yes.
and these thoughts and these emotions as well. How, if somebody wants to connect with the Child Bereavement Center,
Yeah.
how do they do that?
Right. So if someone has experienced a death loss and they'd like to learn more about our services, they can call us. So our phone number is 210-736-4847. They should be able to look us up online too. It's CBCST.org.
Okay.
And there's information on there about how to get in touch with our intake coordinator, how to just call and get more information. If it's something that we can't help with, we always refer out to other agencies too. So if there's a general question of, my child needs therapy, but it's not necessarily grief therapy, where can I turn? We have a list of resources that we can kind of refer out to too, because that's, I think, a big point too, is reminding parents not to be afraid to look into therapy for their children. Therapy does not mean that something is wrong or that something is broken and it needs to be fixed. Therapy is just a healthy outlet that children often need sometimes when in times like this, where they may need a little bit support. So if you're talking to your child and you feel like this feels like more than I can handle, then we always encourage people to reach out for support if they need it.
Well, I also think it's important that people support organizations like yours. And so I know that you guys are on the ground now out in Uvalde, and that, you're taking an active part in helping the moms and dads and the grandmothers and kids out there. But in order to do that, that's resources. How do we get resources to you?
Oh, that would be great. So there is a donate button on our website. We also recently, today, we set up a donate page that's specific to Uvalde. So it's specific to the resources that we're sending out there. And that's actually on a pop-up. Okay. As soon as you go to our website, it lists some resources for parents too, like some really good guides that we found that are helpful. And then there's a small link at the bottom that's just if you'd like to give in another way, here's how you can. But yes, the way that we keep services free for families is through the support of the community. So donations are very helpful, and they go a long way, and we celebrate every single one that comes in. Even today, although we've seen, we're carrying a lot of emotion around here in the office, we did have a few donations come in today, and we couldn't help but feel so grateful and take a moment to just celebrate the people who chose to give. And so we are so grateful to the community of San Antonio. We're also celebrating 25 years this year. So we're, amazed to have been in the community for that long and hope to be in the community for many, many years to come, just continuing to support families.
Chloe, thank you for helping me by carrying some of this load for me today and helping me understand these feelings and helping me and giving me some perspective and some great tips on how to walk through this difficult moment with my kids. And of course, I'm blessed and I don't have it anywhere near as difficult as the families in Uvalde, but the feelings are there and they're heavy and everybody's feeling them to some degree or another. And I think that you were very helpful. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that was Chloe Palacios. Thank you for joining us. And if you feel like this is an organization you want to support, I'm going to support it today. Go to CBCSTX.org and click the donate now button. This is an organization worth backing. Thank you so much, Chloe. Have a terrific day.
Thank you.